Chapter 2 of Our New Zealand Cousins by James Inglis. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Beeswax Candle. Chapter 2. Mount Eden is of course the lion of Auckland, after the harbour, but next to these the most conspicuous features in the suburbs, to the stranger at all events, are the wooden houses, the hawthorn hedges, and the stone walls made of the scoriae blocks, which bestrew the ground so thickly. These stone walls remind one of an upland Scottish or Irish parish, and the resemblance is strengthened in places by the appearance of a sod wall surmounted by a prickly furze hedging. The ascent up Mount Eden is very steep. A few clumps of pines have been planted here and there and relieved the nakedness of the hill. When near the summit you get a view of the deep circular crater with its debris of loose boulders in the centre. Cows graze peacefully now in the still basin, and nursemaids, babies, mashers and maidens, and all the modern medley of tourists munch their apples, display their fashions, or sweep the horizon with field glasses from the terraces erstwhile occupied by cannibals. Here and there a heap of glistening white pippy shells marks the spot where the tattooed warriors, when long pig was scarce, regaled themselves on the shellfish, laboriously carried up the mount from the adjacent shores by the comely dark-skinned women in the brief intervals of peace between the tribes. The scene from Mount Eden is surely unique in its diverse beauty and grandeur. Here may be seen at one glance the tide at its flow on the eastern shore, laving the rugged fringe of Rangitoto, the bold bluffs of the north shore, and the terraced sweep of the mainland, and lapping lazily the massive timbers of the wharfs, where the big ships and steamers are busy discharging the multifarious cargo. On the western side the tide is at the same identical moment receding through the tortuous channels of Manukau Harbour, leaving the broad mudflats with their rocky environment reeking and steaming, bare, black and ugly, under the rays of the afternoon sun. The suburbs glow with beauty as the light gleams on bright roofs, snug gardens, young plantations, and dark green masses of pine and cedar. The domain below, with its wild entanglement of natural bush, fern trees, and dark undergrowth, looks cosy, cool, and refreshing. Everywhere is the glint of water, relieving the tumbled masses of scoriae, the circling outlines of extinct volcanoes, and fortuitous jumble of buildings. The background is filled in by bold outlines of ragged peak and crested hill, amid the recesses of which masses of bush and forest show as great black patches, and the cloudlets trail like the shreds of a great veil, which the merry western breeze has torn and riven to tatters. As one withdraws the eye from the marvellously diverse panorama of loveliness, and looks into the yawning, barren ugliness of the burnt-up focus of bygone fire at his feet, the abrupt transition is one of those rare experiences which form a landmark in memory, and the scene is imprinted with photographic fidelity on the recollection, never again to be effaced. Cab fares are absurdly high in Auckland. 5 shillings an hour is rather too much to pay for the luxury of being jostled about in a vehicle which, whatever the horse may be, is decidedly inferior in comfort and cleanliness to an average Sydney cab. The nimble sixpence is thought more of here than in Sydney. Children will even accept a penny with an approach to gratitude, and not spurn it with the supercilious scorn of a Sydney gamin. Street porters, each with his hand lorry, wait at the corners of the streets to transport parcels or baggage, and I found them a decided convenience, civil in their conversation and reasonable in their charges. If you want your luggage taken to the steamer, samples taken around to a customer, or any little carrying job done, one of these porters will save you the expense of a cab or van, and this class might well be introduced into Sydney. Street commissionaires would be well patronised, and the municipality might take the hint and issue licences. The horse trams are much patronised, and are, in my humble opinion, infinitely more suited to the busy streets of a city than the snorting, noisy, smoking, gritty abominations which monopolise the right-of-way in the busiest streets of the New South Wales capital. But enough of Auckland. Taking advantage of the Easter holidays, we took out our excursion tickets for the Hot Lakes, and started on the Wednesday, a merry party of 6. The railway runs on the narrow gauge, but the carriages are comfortable and clean, and are of local manufacture. The employees were not remarkable for either smartness or civility, at least such was my experience. And doubtless travellers are often exacting and inconsiderate, but tact, temper, and urbanity are as essential to a railway porter as to a policeman, and it is, after all, just as easy to be courteous to a stranger as rude. The appearance and behaviour of the railway officials here struck me as being slovenly and boorish. They seemed to deem it incumbent on them, with luggage especially, to completely outvie the ordinary coasting steamboat sailor in the vigour of their haulage and the destructiveness of their handling. The guards I do not include in this adverse criticism, as we found them polite, active, and neat. The railway stations do not strike one as being elaborately ornate. In fact, they err too much on the other side and are painfully bare and devoid of comfort. The platforms, for instance, need not be all sand and dust and grit. However much from the draper's and cobbler's point of view these may be desirable concomitants. Surely, too, a few benches for tired and tending passengers and a decent awning or some shelter from the elements might be provided. The line is not fenced, and so the engines are all provided with ponderous cow-catchers. Some attempts have been made here and there to plant shade trees along the track, but no attempt at gardening has as yet seemingly been attempted by station masters. Judging from the published timetables, I should think they had plenty of time on their hands to devote a little attention in this direction. Around Auckland, the country seems pretty populous. Farmhouses are frequent, villas numerous, cultivation common, and every now and then a modest little spire marks the site of a snug little village. The strata we note in the cuttings is ridgy, wavy, and streaked like a ribbon, showing the volcanic influences that have been at work. Nearing the Waikato Hills, the broken outlines loom out dark on the horizon. We pass great rich flats with a black peaty soil, and here draining and trenching is being extensively carried on. Where the land lies higher, nothing is to be seen but league upon league of bracken and manuka, or tea-tree scrub. This is as characteristic of all northern New Zealand scenery as gum trees are of Australia, or heather of the Scottish Highlands. The perpetual unbroken stretch of dun brown or green fern soon grows very monotonous, and all the swamps, flax and green sedge, the raupo of the natives, form an agreeable contrast to the eternal ferns. In places, black tracts show where the fern has been burnt down, and in many a distant valley and on the flanks of all the hills we see the smoke of fires where the annual autumn burning is even now being proceeded with. The cattle are fat and sleek. The sheep, compared with the ordinary Australian muttons, look gigantic. At one village we see a rustic mill with its water wheel busily revolving, and the water splashing from its glistening blades. It is the first water mill we have seen for years. Clear water and foaming rivulets, plashing over dark rocks, still brooks gleaming from a sedgy margin, or small still lakes glistening like jewels in some emerald setting, all testify to the fact that here nature is kinder than with us in drought-haunted Australia. At Mercer, which is a tidy compact village with wide streets, we stop for lunch, and we see our first batch of Maoris, dressed in gaudy prints and blankets. Every woman has a child astraddle on her back and a short black pipe in her mouth. The men look awkward, shambling, and out of place in their ill-fitting European garments. Here the strong Waikato flows with a peaceful, sluggish-looking current. Deceptive enough this, as it is in reality swift and full of eddies and undertows which make it dangerous to bathers. This most beautiful river we keep with us now all the way up to Cambridge, getting an occasional glimpse of its pure, free current as the banks here and there open, while we pursue our onward course. At Huntly there are 2 coal mines, with great beds of burning refuse, lines of rail and staiths on the river for the trucks. A small river steamer is here loading. The scene suggests what Newcastle must have been in its very early days. An irate Irishwoman now affords amusement to the passengers by opening out on the colliery doctor for some real or imaginary dereliction of duty. She stormed an orthodox virago fashion, and the poor disciple of Galen meekly had to bow before the storm of Celtic wrath. If I might interpret the glitter in his eye and the flush in his wrinkled cheek, however, I would say that if ever that Irishwoman chances to be in need of his medical services, she may have to undergo about the very liveliest time that all the occult resources of the pharmacopoeia are capable of producing. And note this young, nice-looking Maori girl. What a get-up! Man's hat with feathers of sorts, Scotch shawl of the dambrod pattern, and the colours such as we see in early prints of Joseph when dressed in his historical coat. A vivid green scarf, pinchbeck brooch as big as an Highland Taj, flaming red petticoat and high-heeled boots complete the bizarre costume. And yet the colours, loud and outre as they are, seem to suit the soft, warm complexion, the black hair, gleaming teeth, and lustrous eyes of the dusky maiden. At a small village with an unpronounceable native name, where the Waipa mingles its pellucid stream with the blue Waikato, we see the remains of an ancient Maori burying place. It is market day here. Crowds of stalwart lads career madly up and down on horseback, chasing unruly mobs of bellowing cattle to and fro. Substantial-looking farmers and dealers are congregated around the chief hotel. A busy hum and general bustle bespeak active business, and the neat cottages peeping from clumps of ash, elm, plane, and oak, surrounded with gardens, and the bright, clear river sparkling beside us, all carry our thoughts back to the mother country, and we could easily fancy we were again at a village fair in dear old England. Now we are entering on the famous Waikato pastures. The cattle would delight the eye of a farmer. Cheese-making is here a flourishing industry. The people all seem happy, healthy, and well-to-do. The air is exhilarating. Our spirits rise, our chests expand, and as the train rolls into Cambridge, our halting place for the night, we feel hungry enough to eat a tailor stuffed with needles. End of chapter 2.